The rain has a way of dissolving the day's sharp edges. For me, it blurs the line between the scent of wood varnish in my workshop and the damp earth smell seeping through the window frames. It's a sound that fills the silence, a constant, gentle percussion that keeps the deeper quiet at bay. My life is measured in such things: the predictable rhythm of a plane shaving curls from a plank of oak, the patient waiting for glue to set, the low hum of the dehumidifier in the corner. It's a solitary existence, but a contained one. I mend broken things: splintered chair legs, scarred tabletops, the tired frames of forgotten furniture. It's honest work. It requires a quiet hand and a tolerance for being alone with your own thoughts. My own thoughts are often as worn and familiar as the antiques I restore. They circle the same empty spaces, the quiet rooms of a life that feels paused. There was a before, a time of noise and shared laughter and the easy weight of another person's presence in my apartment. And now there is the after. The after is meticulously ordered, calm, and profoundly lonely. I don't fight it. I've learned to live inside of it, to furnish it with routine, to treat it like a long convalescence from a wound I can't quite remember receiving. Tonight, the rain was different. It wasn't a gentle drumming. It was a relentless, driving sheet of water that slicked the streets and made my small apartment feel less like a haven and more like a cage. The silence was no longer filled, but amplified. I could hear the echo of my own breathing. I put down my sanding block, the fine dust clinging to my fingers, and decided to break the routine. There was a small bar a few blocks away, the Alibi Room, a place of dark wood and low lighting where a man could sit with a pint and be invisible. Anonymity felt like company enough. I pulled on a jacket, the cool night air a welcome shock against my skin, and walked into the downpour. The streetlights bled into the wet asphalt, creating shimmering, distorted reflections. The Alibi Room was just as I remembered it. A handful of patrons scattered at the bar and in the deep booths, the murmur of conversation a soft counterpoint to the quiet jazz trickling from unseen speakers. I found a stool at the far end of the bar, ordered a stout, and watched the rain streak down the large window pane. The composure. There was a profound stillness about her, a melancholic grace that the dim lighting seemed to cling to. She looked like a figure in a painting, beautiful and trapped behind glass. Our eyes met across the room for a fleeting second. I looked away first, feeling like an intruder. A moment later, I risked another glance. She was still looking at me, a small, unreadable expression on her face. Then she offered a slight, almost imperceptible nod, an invitation. My heart gave a strange, unfamiliar lurch. I picked up my glass and walked over. "Mrs. Croft," I said, my voice feeling rusty. She gestured to the seat opposite her. "Ilara, please. And I know who you are. Leo. You're the artist who fixed the marquetry on Richard's antique desk." "I'm just a craftsman," I said, sliding into the booth. The worn leather was cool against my back. "Don't be modest. What you do is a kind of magic. You give broken things a second life." Her voice was low and smooth, like the jazz playing in the background. She took a slow sip of her drink. Her eyes, a deep, thoughtful gray, held mine. There was no artifice in them, only a tired sort of directness. An awkward silence stretched between us. I didn't know what to say. I was the quiet man from the workshop. She was the boss's wife. We existed in different worlds. She broke the silence, a faint, wry smile touching her lips. It didn't quite reach her eyes. "He thinks I'm at a yoga class." The words hung in the air, simple and devastating. It wasn't a confession of infidelity, not the way she said it. It was a statement of profound loneliness, of a life lived under a false pretense. It was an admission that she, too, was seeking refuge in the anonymity of a rainy Tuesday night. I didn't see a cheater. I saw a woman trying to breathe. "Yoga's good for the soul, I hear," I said softly, my attempt at lightness feeling clumsy. Her smile widened, just a fraction, but this time it felt real. So is this, apparently. She raised her glass in a small toast, to a little bit of quiet. We clinked glasses. The sound was a small, clear note in the muffled room. And in that moment, sitting across from this beautiful, sad woman in a dark bar, I felt of cherry wood. It was easy, frighteningly easy. Talking to her felt like sinking into a warm blanket after being out in the cold. When she finished her drink, She stood with that same effortless grace. "Thank you for the company, Leo." "Any time," I said, and I meant it more than I'd meant anything in a long time. She left without a backward glance, disappearing into the rainy night like a phantom. I stayed and finished my beer, the warmth of her presence lingering in the empty booth. I went home to my silent apartment, but for the first time in years, the quiet didn't feel empty. It felt expectant. In the weeks that followed, our lives began to intersect in small, seemingly coincidental ways. I saw her at a small independent bookstore downtown, her fingers tracing the spines of poetry collections. We just nodded, a silent acknowledgement that carried the memory of our shared secret in the bar. Another time, I was picking up coffee, and she was leaving as I was entering. She paused, gave me a genuine smile that briefly lit up her entire face, and said, "Good morning, Leo," before continuing on her way. Each encounter was a small, polished stone dropped into the still water of my life, sending out ripples I couldn't control. I started looking for her. On my lunch breaks, I'd walk past the bookstore or the coffee shop, a knot of anticipation tightening in my stomach. It was foolish. I was the furniture guy. She was Mrs. Richard Croft. But the memory of her in that booth, the sadness in her eyes and the quiet strength in her voice, had taken root in me. I threw myself into my work, sanding and staining and finishing with a renewed focus. My boss, Mr. Croft, was a demanding man, but he appreciated quality. One afternoon, he came into the workshop, his large frame seeming to suck all the air out of the room. He was inspecting a small writing desk I had just finished restoring. "Beautiful work, Leo. Flawless." He clapped me on the shoulder, a gesture that was probably meant to be friendly, but felt more like an assertion of ownership. "Listen, I need you to deliver this to the house this afternoon. My wife is expecting it. She's redoing her study." My heart hammered against my ribs. "Of course, Mr. Croft." "Just take the company van. She'll show you where it goes." He was already turning away, his mind on my forehead. I rang the bell, and a moment later the door swung open. It was Alara. She was wearing a simple gray sweater and dark jeans, her hair pulled back loosely. She looked softer here, younger, without the armor she wore in public. "Leo," she said, her surprise genuine. "I didn't know Richard was sending you." "He said you were expecting the desk." "I am." "Oh, you're getting soaked. Please, come in." I stepped over the threshold, and the world outside fell away. The cold, sterile exterior of the house was a complete lie. Inside, it was a sanctuary. The air was warm and smelled faintly of cinnamon and old paper. Quiet jazz, the same kind from the bar, played from a vintage-looking stereo system. Bookshelves lined every wall, overflowing with books of all sizes. The lighting was soft, coming from strategically placed lamps that cast a golden glow on the dark wood floors. It wasn't a house, it was a nest, a fortress of warmth and quiet beauty she had built for herself within the cold walls of her life. "Just through here," she said, leading me down a hallway. "The study is this way." I followed her, my work boots feeling clumsy and loud on the polished floors. I was acutely aware of the rainwater dripping from my jacket. I felt like a brute, tracking the harsh outside world into her pristine refuge. The study was just as warm and inviting as the rest of the house. I carefully unwrapped the desk and set it in the alcove she indicated, beneath a large window that looked out onto a garden, now drenched and glistening with rain. "It's perfect," she said, running a hand over the smooth, restored surface. "You really do work magic." "I'm glad you like it." I stood there awkwardly, the empty blanket in my hands. My job was done. I should leave. "You're soaked through," she said, her brow furrowing with concern. "You can't drive back like this. Let me make you some tea. Please, let the worst of the storm pass." It wasn't a polite offer. It was a genuine plea. A plea for company. A plea to keep the outside world at bay for just a little longer. "I wouldn't want to impose," I said, the words automatic. "It's not an imposition. It's a kindness I'd like to repay." Her gaze was steady, leaving no room for argument. "Sit. I'll be right back." She disappeared into the ceramic mug, warm in my hands. The tea smelled of bergamot and something spicy. "Thank you," I said, my voice barely a whisper. She curled up in a large armchair by the window, tucking her feet beneath her. I sat on the edge of the other chair, feeling too large, too out of place. The rain beat a steady rhythm against the glass. "Tell me about your work," she said, her eyes fixed on the garden. "I mean, really tell me. What is it you love about it?" No one had ever asked me that. To Mr. Croft, it was a service. To others, a quaint hobby. I took a sip of the hot tea, the warmth spreading through my chest, and I started to talk. I told her about the stories hidden in the grain of the wood, the nicks and scratches that were a map of a piece's history. I told her about the satisfaction of taking something that was broken and discarded and making it whole and beautiful again. I spoke of the patience it required, the need to listen to the wood, to understand its nature before trying to change it. She listened with an intensity that made me feel seen. She didn't interrupt, just nodded occasionally, her gray eyes thoughtful. When I finished, a little breathless from talking so much, she was quiet for a long time. "You're not just mending furniture, are you?" she said softly, finally turning her gaze from the window to me. "You're honoring its past. You're giving it a future." The way she said it, it wasn't just about wood and varnish. It was about something deeper. It was about redemption. I felt a powerful connection to her in that moment, a sense of being understood on a level that startled me. "I try," was all I could manage. She smiled, a sad, knowing smile. "I know something about being a discarded thing, hoping someone will see the value underneath the damage." The confession was so quiet I almost missed it. It was a small, raw fragment of her own story, offered up with the tea and the shelter from the storm. It was a test, a gift. I knew instinctively that my response was critical. Pity would be an insult. Platitudes would be a dismissal. All I could offer was the truth of my own quiet understanding. "The damage is part of the story," I said, meeting her gaze. "It's what gives it character. You can't erase it. You can only..." Talking in low voices, the heavy ceramic mugs warming our hands. Our conversations deepened, moving from the safe territory of books and music to the more treacherous ground of our own lives. She spoke of her marriage in oblique terms, painting a picture of a life of gilded emptiness, of a husband who saw her as another beautiful acquisition, something to be displayed and polished but never truly known. She never used words like unhappy or lonely, but the feelings saturated every sentence. I, in turn, found myself opening up in ways I never had before. I told her about the woman I was supposed to marry, about the accident that had taken her from me 5 years ago. I told her how, after she was gone, the world had seemed to lose its color, its sound, and how I had retreated into the quiet, predictable world of my workshop, a place where I could control the outcomes, where I could mend things instead of losing them. Sharing that pain with Alara didn't feel like a burden. It felt like setting down a heavy weight I hadn't realized I was still carrying. She didn't offer condolences or pity. She just listened, her hand resting near mine on the table, her presence a silent testament of understanding. We were two broken things, finding solace in recognizing the cracks in each other. One Saturday, she called me. Her voice was strained. "Leo, I have a favor to ask. It's stupid. Nothing you ask could be stupid. What is it?" "The garden shed. The door latch is broken and Richard is insistent it be fixed before his golf partners come over tomorrow. He's out for the day. I was wondering if you might..." "I'll be right there," I said, no hesitation. When I arrived, she led me to the back garden. It was her private world, a riot of carefully tended flowers and herbs. It was as much a sanctuary as the house. The shed door hung askew from one hinge. It was a simple fix, but I took my time, enjoying the simple, shared domesticity of the moment. She brought me a glass of iced tea and sat on the garden steps, watching me work. We talked easily, the sun warm on our backs. When I was finished, I tested the door. It swung smoothly and latched with a satisfying click. "Perfect," she said, beaming. The shift was so sudden, so total, it felt like a physical blow. One moment we were sharing a sun-drenched afternoon, the next I was standing alone in her garden, the warmth of the day feeling like a cruel joke. I understood, on some level. The intimacy had become too real. The easy camaraderie had strayed too close to something she wasn't ready for. I was a safe confidant, a gentle repairman. Anything more was a threat to the fragile peace she had constructed for herself. She was retreating back into her fortress, and she had just locked the gate. I drove home in a state of quiet confusion. The next week was silent. I didn't see her at the coffee shop. I didn't get any calls. I tried to focus on my work, but my hands felt clumsy, my mind distracted. The silence in my apartment was heavy again, oppressive. I had been given a glimpse of warmth, of connection, and its absence was a fresh kind of ache. I realized with a jolt that my healing had become tangled up with hers. I had started to feel whole again by offering her a safe place, and now that place had been taken away. I didn't push. I knew that was the one thing I couldn't do. She had to feel safe, and if safety meant distance, I had to respect it. But the waiting was a quiet kind of torture. A week and a half after the incident in the garden, the rain returned. It was a Tuesday night, almost a month to the day since I had first seen her in the alibi room. I was working late in the shop, trying to lose myself in the familiar scent of sawdust and shellac. I didn't hear the car pull up over the sound of the storm. I didn't hear the footsteps. But I felt a change in the air, a presence. I looked up, and she was standing in the doorway of my workshop, drenched and shivering, her beautiful, composed face streaked with rain and tears. She didn't say anything. She just stood there, looking at me, her gray eyes wide with a desperate, unspoken plea. All the poise, all the careful layers of self-protection had been stripped away. She was just raw, beautiful pain. I crossed the workshop in a few strides, took off my dry, warm flannel shirt, and wrapped it around her shoulders. She flinched at my touch, then sagged against me, a shudder running through her body. I led her to the one comfortable chair in the workshop, an old wingback I was in the process of. This calm, mocking voice, as if you were reading a bad novel. He said I was pathetic, a bored, dramatic housewife. She hugged the blanket tighter around herself. And the worst part is, for a second, I believed him. No, I said, my voice firm. I knelt in front of her chair, so we were at eye level. Don't you ever believe that. What you feel is real. The loneliness is real. The need to have a place that's your own. That's not pathetic. It's survival. I came here, she whispered, as if the realization was just dawning on her. I didn't even think. I just drove. This was the only place I could think of to go. My workshop. My dusty, solitary space. It had become a sanctuary for her, too. I'm glad you did, I said softly. We stayed like that for a long time, the silence broken only by the whistling of the kettle and the drumming of the rain on the tin roof. Her tears had stopped, but she was still trembling. I reached out, slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, and gently took her hand. Her fingers were ice cold. I wrapped both of my hands around hers, trying to pour some of my own warmth into her. She didn't pull away. She laced her fingers with mine, her grip surprisingly strong. I'm so afraid, Leo, she whispered, her gaze locked on our joined hands. I know, I said, but you're not alone in it. She finally looked up, her eyes searching mine. In their depths, I saw the war she was fighting with herself, the fear of vulnerability against the desperate need for connection. I saw the ruins of her past and the terrifying, uncertain landscape of her future. And I saw my own reflection, a man who had been hiding in the quiet until a woman in a bar had shown him what he was missing. I leaned in, slowly, and pressed my lips to her forehead. It wasn't a kiss of passion, but of reverence. It was a promise, a vow of protection, a quiet confession that she had become the center of my quiet world. She closed her eyes, and a single, final tear slipped down her cheek. It wasn't a tear of sadness. It was a tear of surrender, of release. In the heart of the storm, in my dusty workshop, something new and fragile and incredibly strong had just been born. With a new resolve. She was wearing her own clothes, not the armor of Mrs. Croft. She was just Alara. I told him I'm leaving, she said, her voice steady. She didn't need to say who he was. I've contacted a lawyer. I'm moving into a small apartment downtown until things are settled. I reached across the table and took her hand. Are you all right? I'm terrified, she admitted with a small smile, and I haven't felt this alive in 10 years. She squeezed my hand. I couldn't have done it without you, Leo. You showed me what it felt like to be seen. I'd forgotten. You did the hard part, I said. All I did was make tea. You did more than that, she said, her gaze intense. You held a space for me. You are patient. You let me be broken without trying to fix me." The words settled deep inside me, healing a part of myself I hadn't known was still wounded. In offering her sanctuary, I had rebuilt my own. The weeks that followed were a careful navigation of a new reality. Her separation was messy and complicated, as they always are. Richard Croft alternated between icy indifference and furious, wounded pride. I stayed out of it, providing a quiet, stable presence for her to come home to. Not my home, not yet. We were careful. We wanted to build this new thing on a foundation of its own, not in the rubble of her old life. Her new apartment was small, but it was hers. We spent evenings there, painting the walls a warm, soft white, unpacking her books, and filling the silence with her quiet jazz. Sharing these mundane tasks felt more intimate than any grand romantic gesture. It was the simple, sturdy stuff of life. We were learning the rhythm of each other, the comfort of a shared silence, the easy joy of a home-cooked meal. One evening, about 2 months after she'd left her husband, we were sitting on the floor of her new living room, surrounded by boxes. We had just finished assembling a bookshelf, a task that had involved more laughter than frustration. "You know," she said, leaning her head against my shoulder, "for years I thought a sanctuary was a place you built to keep the world out, a fortress." She looked around the small, simple room, at her books and her records and the warm glow of the single lamp. Finally, holding out her hand, in her palm lay a single, shining key. I looked from the key to her face. My hands were slick with polish. I wiped them carefully on a rag before reaching out. The key was warm from her skin. It was just a small piece of metal, but it felt impossibly heavy, a tangible symbol of everything we had built. It was the key to her apartment, the key to her sanctuary, the key to the life she was building, the one she was inviting me into. "Are you sure?" I asked, my voice thick. "I've never been more sure of anything," she said softly. "A home isn't a home until you share it." I closed my fingers around the key. It was an answer. It was a promise. It was the beginning of our future, a future built not on grand declarations, but on quiet understanding, shared vulnerabilities, and the profound healing power of a safe harbor. It was the moment we both stopped being broken things in need of mending and became two whole people, choosing to build something new, something strong, together. My past was a quiet room of ghosts. Hers was a gilded cage. But that key unlocked the door to a different kind of space entirely, one we would furnish ourselves, with patience and kindness and all the time in the world. The rain is falling again tonight. It's a gentle, steady sound against the window panes of our apartment. A fire crackles in the small fireplace, casting a flickering golden light across the room. The air smells of old books, wood smoke, and the coffee we just finished. Alara is curled on the sofa, tucked under a heavy wool blanket, reading. The quiet jazz she loves is playing softly on the stereo. I'm in the armchair opposite her, a book open in my lap, though I'm not reading. I'm watching her. I watch the way the firelight catches the silver strands in her dark hair, the slight frown of concentration on her face as she reads, the peaceful rise and fall of her breathing. There is a calmness in her now, a settled quality that wasn't there a year ago. The wounded, haunted look in her eyes has been replaced by a quiet contentment. She is at peace. She is home. She must feel my gaze because she looks up from her book, a soft smile touching her lips. "What are you thinking about?" she asks, her voice warm and low. "I think about the man I was, locked in his..." Exactly what I mean. Her smile deepens, reaching her eyes, and they shine with a light that is all her own. She doesn't need to say anything. We have built a language that exists beyond words, in the comfortable space between us. She simply raises her hand, beckoning me over. I put my book down, go to the sofa, and slide in beside her under the warmth of the blanket. She rests her head on my chest, and I wrap my arms around her, holding her close. Outside, the rain continues to fall, a gentle, cleansing rhythm washing the city clean. But in here, we are safe. We are warm. We are whole. This is our cathartic stillness, the quiet exhale at the end of a long, hard journey. It is not an ending, but a new and deeply peaceful beginning.